If I push myself harder, I won't be rejected. If I never relax, listen, I feel you, man, I will stay ahead. But here's a problem. I believe that chronic self criticism activates the same stress pathways in the brain as just external threats. And I think that means that the body does not extinguish between someone attacking you and then you attacking yourself internally. That's so deep. The harsh voice in your mind was learned, which means that it can be replaced. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Heal to Lead podcast, the space where we're coming to unlearn surviving life and embracing wholeness. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about presence. I am your host, you know me, Kevin Overton-Hadnot, aka the Hope Dealer, aka your favorite therapist, however you want to call me. I'm here, I'm with you, I'm ready to jump in. I'm always excited to do, podcasts and just recording and to just bring you great content. But I still want to hear from you all. So make sure you're commenting, make sure you're liking, make sure you're sharing the podcast out to other people. If you got blessed by something that I said, please share it with someone else. Even to people in my social media space are always tagging me in clips or making comments. So I appreciate you all. Shout out to that. Remember, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. All right, what are we talking about today? Today we are going to jump in. We're talking about just internalized voices and healing the inner critic. This is something I've been really reflecting on myself lately through just, books that I've been reading and just through my own reflection time. A lot of the work as a therapist means I'm pouring into other people, pouring, and giving and showing up and holding space. And that's part of me giving to other people. But I've found that it's also important to me to pour into myself and to refuel my own tank. And one of the ways I've been doing that is really reading one of the books I'm going to talk about today. So, talking about the healing the inner critic, and my hope that we walk away with today, and I may say this a couple of times, but like compassion, self-compassion, that compassion that you give yourself, that compassion that you give, that's what rewires the brain. And we'll talk about that. Some questions I might bring up throughout the conversation are, where does the inner critic originate? Or how can leaders, right? I'm always talking to leaders or men who are leading, whether that's themselves, families, communities, churches, fraternities, all the things. How can leaders reframe self-talk? So before we jump in, before we start today, of course, I want to do something very simple. It's not a um, big woohoo celebration. It's really just like taking a moment to slow down, to breathe together. And speaking of breathing, one of the things I went and did this past weekend, I spoke at a workshop at Top Golf, and just really to the shout out to Jack and Jill of America, the Austin chapter, for just really inviting me not only to be the stepmaster, but to be one of the speakers for one of the Botillion workshops this year, and brought in to really talk about how do we master calm in chaos and the art of balance. And one of the techniques that we talked about was breathing and really being mindful about that diaphragmatic breathing and, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, and releasing for 4. And so you just right here, right now, if you're able to, if you're listening or you're watching, I invite you into this episode, but really I invite you into this space of reflection and just sitting with yourself and also with slowing down. So take a deep breath in through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold. Now slowly release through your mouth. Do that one more time. That's even for me. Hold and release. And what you may notice is your body begins to soften a bit, right? Immediately. Like your shoulders may lower, you may feel more relaxed, like your breath deepens as you do that. Because normally, as we're running and moving and we're coming, wearing many hats, we're coming and going, um, we need that space to deepen our breath to override our nervous system. Your nervous system then begin or can begin to shift from survival mode to work more regulation, to be more regulated. And that matters because we're talking about something that lives inside almost every leader, every man in particular, every helper, every high performer, every human. And this is a voice that says, I should be better. This is the voice that says, you already know this already, or you should already know this. This is the voice that says, you're failing behind. This is the voice that says, you're not enough. You're not man enough. And today's episode is about the inner critic that lives inside of us and where it comes from and why it becomes so powerful and why we give it such power, right? And now healing, it can fundamentally be, or I think healing, it can fundamentally change the way we lead ourselves, men lean in, lead ourselves, and the people around us. So before we dive in really to the my clinical perspective or whatever you want to call it, I don't want to be too clinically, quote unquote, right? I just want to be another brother talking to you all. Before we dive into that more deeper conversation, I wanted to reference a book that you might find helpful, and I think in a more powerful way, and that is this book. That is this book, The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself. And in my notes, I wrote down one of the central ideas of the book is so many of us never realize that one, you are not the voice in your head. Hey, what's up, guys? I hope you're enjoying this episode. I wanted to pause to show you my journal, A Man's Guide to Healing and Leadership. It's available right now on Amazon.com. Pick it up today. Pick it up for you, for your son, for your brother, for your uncle, for your cousin. This is a 21-day journey to reclaim your strength, your purpose, and authentic leadership through healing. I take you through 21 days of deep, reflective content that oftentimes we sweep under the rug or we avoid or we don't make time for. But this journal allows us to make space for the things that's really important to us, and that is our own healing. One of the days we talk about building resilience, embracing vulnerability, the power of forgiveness, confronting anger. Day 3 is my favorite, which is on healing the inner child. Listen, man, pick this book up today. I hope it will bless your life. Thank you. Now back to the show. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. You have to understand that as a fundamental principle. It's going to take some. It's going to take some time to get to know that idea a little bit more and sit with that a little bit more, and separate ourselves from that particular voice, right? But you are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. And Singer, in his book, he explains that there is a constant narrator inside of our minds that comments on every single thing. Like, relax, right? But it comments on things like what we should have said, what we did wrong, what others might think. I mentioned that a second ago. And most of our entire lives, we're really assuming that voice is who we are. But the moment that you just pause, take a step back, and observe the voice, I think something should begin to shift. You begin to realize that you are not the critic. Actually, you really are the awareness, noticing the critic. It's a deeper conversation to begin to have, and to begin to think of the voice in your mind, the critic, as that particular way. But some takeaways from this book, I challenge you to go read it and come back and comment on this page once you have digested it some, and let me know your thoughts, because this book, I'm still going through it. One of my mentors, he really helped me one day He's read like one book. I think it was last year. It was like maybe a 6 month period. He read one book 4 or 5 times, and I was like, "What? What's going on?" But I think he helped me just maybe go through the book one time, just get what you can get from it, go through it again, maybe take a few notes, go through it again, allow it to sort of wash over you. And again, that helped me just one, take my time, but then two, realize I don't have to rush through the concept gathering process. I can just read it and see what comes up and not get too bogged down with like writing in the lines, underlining, circling, understanding every single thing every single time I read it. That may not be my portion and to go to church folk talk in that moment. But some takeaways. I'm reading it again, and what came up for me is one of the things are thoughts are. And I'm still wrestling with this particular thought here, right? No pun intended, but thoughts are just events, not identity. Um, just because the mind says something does not mean that it is the truth. That was one takeaway. Another one is awareness creates more freedom, right? When you notice the inner voice, and instead of automatically believing it, you create distance from it, and I think that is the primary goal, one of the goals here. The mind often tries to control life through criticism. If you believe it keeps judging you, and guess what? You'll stay safe. Um, you will stay safe or perform better. And I think that can be just a helpful nugget to tuck away in your back pocket. But um, those are uh, some thoughts. But that last thought here, you'll believe that you'll perform better. That's not really what happens, right? Criticism doesn't create sustainable growth. And I think the one point I mentioned earlier is what does is that is compassion. That is compassion. And I'm going to get into why I believe that, but I wanted to pause here to just really think about what is this idea of compassion? Like, what is compassion? We hear this, um, this big word. We often use it in the therapy room. We use it kind of talking about mental health. We often hear self compassion as a theme, but compassion is the ability to recognize suffering in yourself or others and respond with care, respond with understanding, and a desire to help or relieve suffering. So maybe in this conversation, there could be some elements to think about for you to consider. There's three of them that I noted down. One of them could be the awareness of suffering, right? So noticing that someone, and again, that someone can include yourself, is experiencing pain, is experiencing difficulty or struggling. So that awareness of suffering is one core element of compassion, right? Another one could be emotional resonance, whether that's feeling moved by that suffering rather than ignoring or judging or distancing from it. I'm thinking of the Good Samaritan as an example here, having that emotional connection and then sort of, showing altruism. And then motivation to respond with care. I'm not saying that's your responsibility every time, but that wanting to help, maybe support, that comfort or reduce. Wanting to help, support, comfort, or wanting to reduce that suffering. Again, that's motivation to respond with care. But in simple terms, compassion is noticing pain. It's feeling concern and wanting to help. If I were to go deeper in here, maybe in just more of a deeper lens, compassion is really considered a regulation based emotional response that activates our brains wanting to sort of care give and like having this safety system. And I think all of those are associated with either emotional regulation, maybe social bonding, reduced stress and shame, increased resilience. But I think just one last thing about compassion. I just wanted to kind of separate this idea of compassion versus empathy, and I guess, and sometimes these two are often confused, but just very different. Empathy is more of, in my mind at least, feeling what someone else feels. Compassion is feeling concern and wanting to help. So empathy alone can sometimes lead to emotional overwhelm. Maybe in my experience, I'll say that. But then compassion then adds action and care. Now, I'm not judging either way if you are lacking in any of those areas. I just wanted to give you food for thought here. So self compassion, when it is directed inward, then right, that's where we talk more about the self compassion. which means treating yourself with kindness instead of harsh judgment. Man, I'm giving you permission to do that, right? You can treat yourself with kindness, men too, right? Instead of harsh judgment. Recognizing that struggle is part of being human. We all have ups and downs. We all are going through something. Take a breath on that. Maybe even responding to your own mistakes with understanding rather than shame. We're going to make mistakes sometimes. Oops. I text someone oops today, right? It's okay. You're human. I think this was Kristen Neff who mentioned self compassion is treating yourself and with the same care you will offer a good friend who is struggling. Hope you're taking notes. So, last little psychoeducation on compassion that I want to add. If you have other thoughts on compassion, definitely drop it in the comments. Compassion is the ability to see pain, whether it's in someone else's, um, whether it's in someone else or inside yourself, and respond with care or judgment. So today we're really just going to explore like how that inner voice, right, formed and how leaders, how men, how we can transform it. So where does the inner critic comes from or come from? Maybe this important question here. Yeah, where does the inner critic originate? And thinking about this for a second, the inner critic is usually an internalized voice. Internalized voices are messages that originally came from outside of us, but were repeated so much, so often that they became part of our own internal dialogue. They became sort of scripts that we begin to live out. Maybe those messages come from parents, maybe those messages come from teachers, from authority figures, from coaches, from religious systems, ding, 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 religious systems, cultural expectations. I was talking to some guys recently, and a lot of it came from the environment in which they grew up, right? So those cultural environments that were then indwelt within them, internal dialogue that looked like X, Y, Z, right? Not to go into too many details, maybe came from past partners, right? Some of that experience that we gleaned from them, the good, bad, and the ugly, by the way. But obviously the ugly for this part of the conversation. But even peer groups growing up. So those messages may have come from all of those different places that created or cultivated our internal dialogue. Um, Children don't have the ability to critically evaluate these voices. We just absorb them, right? And even if we're not children, we live in it long enough, then we too become children of those ways of being, and then they become thoughts and then voices in our minds. So yeah, if a child repeatedly hears, "You're lazy, you're too emotional, you should be stronger, you should be perfect," those voices eventually become self-talk. And the brain essentially records them and, like I said, begins replaying them internally. And this is how I believe the inner critic is formed. Now, you might be asking Kevin, aka the hope dealer, like why does the brain hold on to criticism? Like the brain evolved to detect threats. So negative feedback often gets prioritized because the brain believes that it might help us avoid danger. Again, come in closer because this is science 101, right? Your brain is always scanning for threats to make sure you are able to be safe. The mind believes, if I criticize myself first, I can prevent failure. If I push myself harder, I won't be rejected. If I never relax, listen, I feel you, man. I will stay ahead. But here's a problem. I believe that chronic self criticism activates the same stress pathways in the brain as just external threats. And I think that means that the body does not extinguish between someone attacking you and then you attacking yourself internally. That's so deep. That's so deep. The nervous system still experiences as danger. So, as leaders, as men who are constantly criticizing ourselves, I include myself in that too, we often live in a state of like chronic stress. We often live in a state of perfectionism, maybe imposter syndrome, emotional exhaustion. And it's not because they're weak, it's really just because their mind learned to survive through relentless continuous, ongoing internal pressure. Okay, so then I'll go in my mind to the cost of this inner critic in leadership. Again, I always stress leadership to mean like men leading or women leading, right, if you will. Like the inner critic doesn't just affect our internal world. Excuse me. I believe it shapes how we lead. So I'll say this with love. I'll say this with love. Unhealed critics often create leadership patterns like over control, perfectionism, difficulty receiving feedback, emotional distance, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. The inner critic does not just affect our internal world; it shapes how we lead. And these patterns look like over control, right? So leaders with harsh inner critics often try to control everything. Listen, raise your hand if that's you. I can see this a little bit, like maybe one ounce of this is me too. So I'm sitting with you. So leaders with harsh inner critics often try to control everything because mistakes feel intolerable. Mistakes feel like a big deal, and so some companies it could be right. Some organizations it might be. So I'm not saying don't pursue excellence. I just think that there should be some I would say some mindfulness around it. That's what I want to say. And then control becomes a way to then avoid the shame. Another one is perfectionism. Perfectionism is not excellence. I'll say it again. Perfectionism is not excellence. It's really fear, right? That we try to dress up as excellence. It's the fear that if something goes wrong, like it confirms my message. I was right. I'm not enough. And again, these are things we have to begin thinking about and to be more mindful and to really begin moving to this idea of how can I begin to give myself more compassion in this particular area. Another pattern that shows up is the difficulty receiving feedback. And I'm gonna just take as y'all say, clutch my pearls on this one because I understand like feedback is so hard to receive in 2026. Ironically, leaders with strong inner critics though sometimes struggle with this feedback. And not because they really reject growth. Like everyone who doesn't want to grow, right? I'm raising my hand. I love the idea of growth, but sometimes that criticism internally is already overwhelming. And then external feedback though can feel like confirmation of maybe one of the deepest fears that you would have had or that you have currently about something that you're dealing with or navigating. Another pattern is emotional distance, right? So when leaders are harsh with themselves or with ourselves, and we often become harsh with other people, right? So what's in you comes out of you. Not intentionally, but because compassion for others usually begins with compassion for ourselves. So if we don't allow ourselves grace, then we struggle to extend it outwardly. So I'm always practicing grace in myself, so much so that I think it kind of exudes my environment and is manifesting in other places. So again, those were just some of the ideas or thoughts that came up for me about the cost of the inner critic, whether and within our leadership, especially again as men leading families, ourselves, or other people. So how do we heal the inner critic? There's hope. I'm the hope dealer. I want to always bring hope. And the message, simply, if you're just taking notes, is compassion rewires the brain. Compassion rewires the brain. Um, so again, the brain is not fixed. I love that about our brain. It's neuroplastic, meaning it rewires through this repeated experience. And one of the most powerful rewiring mechanisms we know is self-compassion. I've already kind of mentioned that and introduced that at the beginning. But just to say one more time, self-compassion is not self-pity. It is not lowering standards. It really is just really changing the tone of the internal voice. So how do we do that? You might ask. One, let's just begin by just noticing. Let's just notice the critic. Again, you cannot heal what you cannot see. So start by simply noticing when the critic appears. So some examples just say, or could that may come up, that was stupid, or I should have done this better, or I'm behind everyone else, or whatever negative self talk you are thinking of or experiencing. Just begin to notice that pattern, and over time, I believe that the observation in and of itself can begin to create that distance or separation from that, right? From that voice. So notice the critic is step one. Step two is let's just question the voice. Let's question that voice, right? Let's put that voice on trial. Um, what are my questions here? You might be asking, whose voice does this sound like? And I think often people suddenly realize, oh, wait, that was my old coach from like the third grade or from like the fifth grade. Or that sounds like my dad, or that sounds like a teacher who embarrassed me. And I think recognizing, again, these are not like $1 million bills being handed to you, but these are $1 million thoughts to help you rewire. Recognizing this origin helps you see that that voice was learned. And the good news about that voice being learned, or recognizing that that voice was learned, is it means that it can also be unlearned. Step three is then we can begin replacing criticism with coaching. So, healthy leaders, healthy men speak to themselves the way a great coach would. Not you're terrible, but maybe something like, all right, that didn't go how you wanted. So, then what can we learn from it? Right? What can we learn from it? Compassion doesn't eliminate accountability. I think it actually strengthens, right? It strengthens our growth. But, just to say really, really quickly, um, because shame shuts the I think when we think about shame, I mentioned shame in our previous episode. Shame sort of shuts the brain down, and the opposite of that, then compassion then can keep it open. And then fourth is practice self-compassion daily. We have to begin to rewire and rework and refuel this idea on a daily basis. I think research, in my brief research, shows that compassionate self-talk it activates brain regions that are associated with safety, with motivation, with learning, and with resilience. And I think this is why compassion literally rewires the neural pathways over time. And again, it's going to take a lot of work. That's why I'm believing in for you to do this as a daily practice. And the goal isn't to eliminate the inner voice. I didn't really finish that thought earlier. The goal isn't to eliminate the inner voice, but it really is to transform it from a critic to just a guide for your life, right? Which is very two totally different ways of thinking about or observing or listening to rather that particular inner voice. So I hope that was fruitful for you guys. That really has been super, super, super helpful. Just for me alone, just as I'm just helping and growing in my own ways and being as a human alongside you all. And then again, some of the things that I talked about was from this book, The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself by Michael A. Singer. I got to call out my girl, B. Simone. She actually read this book, by the way. So shout out to the work that you're doing with LTTA. So proud of you, and just thank you for just being authentic and being yourself. And yeah, something that you I think B. Simone read this book. Maybe I think it was last year or the year before last, and it really hit me as well. So I wanted to read it and bring that to you all on the Hill to Lead platform. So, all right, now we're at the time of our episode where we read a letter from the listener or from a listener. And this listener is from, I always forget the name when I bring this over here. I'm so sorry. I don't have a name for this listener, but this person says, I'm in my mid 30s and I recently moved to a new state for work. I bought a home here, and it was something I worked hard for, but honestly, it wasn't or hasn't felt exciting like I thought it would. Now, most days it just feels quiet. I don't know anyone here, and I realize how much I relied on my old friends and routines back home. I find myself coming home after work, and the house just feels empty. I keep wondering if I made a mistake moving. Part of me feels embarrassed for even feeling this way because I know this was supposed to be a good opportunity. But lately, I've just been feeling lonely and homesick, and I'm not really sure how to start building a life here. Any advice or thoughts would be really helpful. Thanks for listening. I'm always tell people, I'm always mindful about giving advice. That's not what this platform is for. It's not how I do therapy. We don't give advice, but I have some things to consider. So thank you for trusting me with this. So first, thank you for writing in, um, and I want to just say this very clearly, and that is what you're experiencing is completely normal. Major life transitions, even the positive ones, sometimes create just a temporary sense of loss, and that's something that we don't always allow space for. We just kind of we feel it and begin to try to reject it and be embarrassed or be nervous about it or anxious or sad about it. But yeah, major life transitions, often bring a temporary sense of loss. Like you didn't just move houses. It sounds like you moved from a to a different state, but not even just that. You moved away from like what probably familiar faces, from comfortable routines, from places that even, and this could be deep as well, like places that even held memories for you. So I think I'm always talking about nervous system lingo here, but yeah, your nervous system is likely just adjusting to this entirely new environment. So again, I'm just giving so much space and grace for that. Loneliness, though, in this stage for me, I think is not a sign um, of you made a wrong decision, but it could be just a sign, that your life is in maybe a transition phase. And I think thinking of it from that lens, kind of hopefully can allow you to receive it or maybe even accept it a little bit differently. But maybe here's some things if you are to consider that could be helpful in this season. One, just give yourself permission to grieve what you left behind or what you left. We often, I guess, accept the we often accept um, we like I said this way, we often accept the environment when we moved from um, let me say it again. We often expect excitement when we move forward, but oftentimes, I guess growth. I guess the homestick is the place of growth, as the beginning of growth. Maybe I don't have a lot of um, like excitement around the homesickness because I definitely sit with that. I'm someone who transitioned to college in a whole different like 4 states away, and definitely experienced some of this. But hindsight is 30/30. But one of the places I want to say now, yeah, that homesickness, or maybe growth sometimes begins with that homesickness. I think secondly, maybe just focus on small relationships or relational steps. So not like an instant community that's going to come from like 5 to 5,000 or to 10,000 right away, but maybe look for simple opportunities. I'm not sure if you work out, but maybe gym could be one, or a gym class, or cooking class, right? Attending local meetups. I've actually seen a lot of success in like just attending one or two local meetups, and instantaneously you're finding like your new favorite person or your new bestie. Shout out to some of the places that are around my city, run clubs, hangouts, Sunday fun days, and again, not just to like turn up and mimosa me to death, but just to really make and find genuine connection. You might find it at a volunteer opportunity. One of my clients, or someone I'm thinking of, recently joined a vet, or what is it, animal shelter, to volunteer because they really love animals. So really, that also gives some relational connection, just animals and that support, right? That love connection, but even through people and the friends that you make there. Becoming a regular at a coffee shop. I'm reading like a fictional book, but I'm reminded of this story where this one guy went to a coffee shop and found pictures of everyone on the wall, and he actually went to go meet them. Now, I don't recommend this for anybody, but the idea is that he got to meet familiar people through just being a regular at a coffee shop. Again, community doesn't appear overnight, so just give yourself more grace and space, just knowing that. But it does. I grow in this more repeated proximity. So think about that, and maybe thirdly, just remind yourself that loneliness is temporary. Easier said than done, I'm sure. But hopefully that allows you, um, as you're moving forward through connection, you're able to find some more opportunities relationally that way. Um, Often. it's good to think of it this way too. Right now you're just in this in between space. So the old chapter, has closed from what I can hear, and this new one is still forming and just giving it more space to do that. But being, open and curious, right? But also patient. And I think the patient is important so that you're not, moving only to the loneliness or creating more anxiety that you haven't done it correctly. You have to do or overperform or show up in all these spaces and overwhelm your system. So be patient with yourself as well. So yeah, this place may feel unfamiliar today, but one day hopefully it'll feel more like home. So I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you for writing into the show. All the power to you. And I'm so I put the name at the end of my notes here, but it was Tim. Tim, man, thank you for writing in. All the best to you and your new opportunity. Let us know how you're doing. I would love to hear from you on at a later moment. So again, you can write into our show at healtolead@gmail.com, and we might read a letter from you on our show. Um, I like that part of the episode because it's more of a talk back conversation. So thank you for that. We're gonna close it here. I've been talking, I've been yapping, running my mouth, but I'll definitely want to end it and close. Just for one final thought, right? If you struggle with the inner critic, remember this: the harsh voice in your mind was learned, which means that it can be replaced. And leadership in men, it's not about eliminating every single mistake, but it really is about creating a relationship with yourself that allows you to grow without shame. Um, and I hope that it's helpful. Hope that resonated with you. Again, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe to Heal to Lead. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and on YouTube. I've been your host, the one and only Kevin Overton-Hadnot. Love, peace, and greatness.